Hello and welcome to the Life of Learning podcast. I'm Mr. Frank, and I just wanted to do a podcast on a podcast that I'd basically come across. It's just a quick 3 episode podcast series that I managed to find, and it was called How to Raise a Parent. I was interested in this podcast because, as if you've been following my things for a while, I'm interested in how human beings learn and education and learning, and also in particular how that affects children, and also the fact that as adults we tend to believe that we need to make children learn, and I've come to realize more and more that we don't actually need to make children learn, that children have an innate desire to want to learn. We as humans have an innate desire to want to learn. But as soon as we try forcing that, and forcing people to learn certain things, especially things that they don't really have a desire to learn, we start killing off some of that desire. But yes, if we realize that that we come as humans ready to learn, then we don't need to make it happen so much. And because we lose some of this ability to learn, really, as we grow older, it's often drummed out of us through society. We can actually learn a lot from children by looking back at what children are doing, and through observing them, that helps us understand how we can learn better ourselves. So yeah, it was interesting hearing this 3-part series called How to Raise a Parent, and I strongly encourage you to just have a bit of listen through the series. It's just 3 episodes long, and the first one and the third one were okay, I thought. There's certainly some interesting things, but probably my favourite one of the 3 was certainly the second one. So yeah, the 3 episodes cover basically things that we can learn from children, such as bravery, creativity, and making friends. And so the one on creativity was especially good. And in these episodes, the person interviews a parent, and usually also some sort of expert, either a psychologist or an author or someone like that. So in this episode, the host interviewed a lady called Danielle, who was an art critic and artist. She also has a blog and I think a book called The Jealous Curator, and she named it that because she was so jealous of everyone else's ability to do art, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But she's also a mother, and she had, like I was saying before, sometimes our ability to learn gets stifled throughout as we grow up, and this was certainly the case for her. She was doing art, I believe, at university, and her painting professor said in front of the whole class to her that she should never paint again. And it completely broke her confidence, and she avoided art. She avoided certainly showing her art to other people, because she became so self-conscious about it. And so instead of doing art, she went into design, which I guess is slightly related, but she worked in design for 18 years, and then eventually she had children, and in particular her son Charlie, and she stayed at home. And as she was observing Charlie, she noticed how creative he was, and also just that time spent at home, she felt that she also needed a creative outlet. And so her son Charlie's creativity sparked her interest to start doing art again. She was looking at her son, and she was basically saying, what am I doing with my life? I used to be like that. I used to be creative like he was. So yeah, and that's where she started looking more into art. She started doing art, and even though she felt really self-conscious about it, she started talking with artists, and that's how she kind of started her blog. But one thing that she also learned from her son regarding creativity and kids in general is she said, we get so worried about, if is this going to get published, or is my artwork going to be hung in a gallery or whatever. But she realized that kids just make to make. They just make because it's fun to be creative and to make things. And they're not so distracted about what other people particularly think of it. And in regards to being, her initial name for her blog was The Jealous Curator, and because she thought, she was looking around her and basically seeing that all these people were doing all these amazing things, and there was no possibility that she would have anything of value to really add in the world. Like, basically all the creative ideas had already been taken. And one thing that she'd realized was that there is actually room for everyone to be creative, and you just need to find your own niche and do what you love. And she realized that that meant for her too. And I think that's a really awesome and powerful thing to remember, is that there is no limit really to creativity. This is an amazing world, a complex world, and to think that that all the creative ideas have already been done, means you're not probably thinking outside the box enough. And that we just need to take who we are, the things that make us who we are, which is unique to us, and we're not the same as everybody else. And we can actually use our experiences, use everything we've got to actually dive deeper into a particular niche, and so become really, really valuable. And in a way that we really, really enjoy as well. And so that's, what I'm trying to do here. This is kind of, I'm taking all the experiences of basically who I am and channeling into this thing that I'm really enjoying doing, which is making podcasts and writing articles and having conversations with people about how we learn. And so I found that we interview that she did with Danielle, who was a mum, really good. And then she also had an interview with a guy called Tom Sturgis, who wrote a book called Every Idea is a Good Idea. And again, that might go onto my reading list. But he also noticed, similar I guess to what Danielle pointed out, was that as we get older, we tend to self-edit ourselves more and more. And he said that the self-editing process is one of the enemies to creativity. So instead of an idea flowing out of our head, an adult will go, gosh, I could find a better way maybe to phrase that, and go over it 1,000 times. Or we might say, I'll embarrass myself if I say that. So we tend to self-edit ourselves a lot. And I think, we do need to be careful with this idea. I think there is a place for a bit of self-editing, to not just completely go loose. But also we do need to realize that, yes, the more time we spend editing ourselves, the more we stymie and stop our creative flow. And that's the point that Tom Sturgis was trying to get across. And I think it's another really good thing to keep in mind. So yeah, he goes on to say, Tom Sturgis went on to say that the fewer filters we can put on ourselves as we're thinking and watching and looking at the world, the greater the chances of our innate original creativity being released into the world. And he pointed out that's basically what kids do, so some instances when kids hum, or they might make up a dialogue between two dolls or things like that, is that they're fearless about it. They don't necessarily have that filter of, oh, is this really going to disturb someone? Am I annoying someone? Maybe I'll be embarrassing myself, or things like that. They are kind of often in their own world, and that creativity comes out of them. Whether it's humming melodies that they're making up, or dialogue that they're making up. And so I think it is a great thing to realize that we can learn so much from kids, and some of the ways that kids go about things, and in particular the creativity of children. And this is certainly one of them. Tom Sturgis also made a further point about embracing your ideas, capturing them, trying not to go, oh, I'm going to work on this later, because if we do that, often the lightning will fade. And I realize that very strongly when I'm doing these podcasts. If I think of an idea and I do it right away, it usually works out far better than if I sit on it and put it off. Exactly. It was quite hard to actually get round to doing this podcast, because I think I didn't have time when I first listened to How to Raise a Parent, the podcast series. And I was going to do a podcast on it, and then it eventually got put off, and it was quite hard to actually get myself then, while I really loved it, that when I initially had it, was quite hard to actually get round, okay, let's sit down and get this podcast out there. So I can see the difference in myself, depending on how I go about some of the podcasts. There are podcasts that I thought I would make that I never ended up making, because I didn't do anything about it when the idea hit me, basically. And there's podcasts that I didn't know I was going to make until basically maybe an hour or half an hour before I started recording, basically because the ideas, the inspiration hit then, and I just needed to capture it right then and there. Those are some really interesting things to remember, and the way that we can go about life, learning from what children are doing and regaining some of that creative spark that we had when we were children, and where these things came a lot more natural to us. I think those are some excellent lessons that we can learn, and this is kind of a key thing that I want to get across, that when we think about children and adults, that it's not a one-way street. Adults often seem to think that children are simply beings nearly that don't really have anything to offer, and we need to make them into people that have something to offer. And it's like, no, actually they have something to offer right here, right now, and that it's not a one-way street, that children can actually input in valuable ways into our own lives. Yes, and we can input valuably into their lives as well, but it is a two-way street. It was great just being reminded of that, and I really, thumbs up to the host of this show, I believe her name is Mallory, who put this series together, who even had the idea of, putting it out there and saying, hey, there's actually things that we can learn from children. And one of those is certainly in the area of creativity. So thanks so much for watching this podcast, and I recommend, again, like as I said, if you'd like to, check out the podcast series, How to Raise a Parent, and we'll see you next time. All right, thanks, bye.